Wow.
Wow.
Good job.
Look at that clap.
Look at you.
So good.
Thinking like a producer
I'm just
of
trying
content.
to make both of our jobs easier, depending on who edits this, which will probably be you.
It'll be me.
Yeah. But, yeah.
I could teach you tomorrow.
You can certainly try.
I should just make you do it. I'm going to make you into an editor.
I mean,
by force.
Here's the thing. I am a video editor now, because I have to do it for work.
Mm-hmm.
Very simple video editing. But I can put PNG images on videos, and I can cut videos and stitch them together.
Well, there you go. You just have to do that, but with audio. You don't have to worry about the visuals.
The program that I use is not very easy to view video that way, so...
What program do you use to edit?
Shotcut.
Oh.
Because it's free.
So is DaVinci.
Yeah, but it's harder to learn DaVinci.
It's really not. I had no experience in DaVinci before making this podcast.
Show starts in 3, 2, 1.
Cinema Crush.
Welcome to Cinema Crush.
I'm Emily Salisbury, and now my name is legally official.
Wow.
Yay.
I'm Jacob Salisbury, your other host.
Yeah. And I'm a wife, and he's a husband.
Oh, so they say.
Or so they say. We're just conceptual beings.
But you probably weren't expecting this episode in your feed. Neither was I a few days ago.
No. But then this thing happened called Rings of Power came out on Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm. Which I forgot that it was airing this week.
Well, for some reason in my brain, I thought it was coming out on September 9th because I was like, oh, it's coming out around my birthday. But it came out on the 2nd, which is still close to our birthdays by proxy of it being in the same month. I guess just whenever I see September, I think that's when my birthday happens. So anything that happens in September feels like it's just for me. Because that makes sense.
Yeah.
But Lord of the Rings in particular is important to both of us, so we wanted to feature this.
I pitched this to you because, how often are we going to come into a series this big?
Yeah.
To review while it's coming out?
Right, exactly. It feels like we need to kind of jump on this while
our podcast is in its baby steps.
Because I think while the primary focus of our podcast is to show each other movies that are important to us, I think more than anything, we pretty much watch a show or a couple episodes of different shows or a movie every night, just because we like to consume content. Because we're old Gen Z people.
We've been doing more reading, too.
We've been doing more reading.
It's not just TV.
But, our routine is, eat dinner and watch a TV show. We've been watching Sandman, and we've been watching Tuca and Birdie, and, those are the things that we watch while we eat dinner. That's what we do. That's, what I expect to do every night.
And then we talk about it.
Just like we do with movies. Especially because TV shows are, there are so many good ones out there nowadays, so there's a lot to talk about, and TV shows more often than not are what I find myself talking about with other people, because I think that's just the nature of TV shows, especially when companies choose to release them by episode or release a couple of episodes at a time.
Right, rather than dumping the whole season on you.
Because you get your, did you see the episode that released last night? And then you'll have your discussion about, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. What do you think's going to happen next time? And it's just that exciting sort of unless it's a show that's already been out for a while, and then you're like, have you seen show? And somebody would just be like, no, I haven't. And then you're like, okay. And that's where the conversation ends. like new shows coming out offers a place for you to discuss and find out what people are interested in, I guess. This is definitely a show I will be talking with people about too, because
oh
my gosh,
the world
a
has
Lord of the
been
Rings show,
the world has been talking about it for
a
months
Tolkien
now.
show. I want to pause real quick before we get into discussing this, because we do want to do our little segment, our little "What are we drinking?" segment.
Weird snacks and drinks.
Or whatever you want to call it.
I think I'd like to do so we've already recorded our second movie episode of the podcast, and in that we tried a drink that we found that was interesting and basically did a mini review of it. But I want to do a podcast within a podcast that's called "What is Emily Drinking?" Because as many of you who know me might know, I am a coffee person. I am a barista part-time, and I really enjoy coffee and tea, to the point that today I went out and I got a pour-over kettle, a gooseneck kettle, from my boss at the coffee shop that she wasn't using, and I went and bought a knockoff Chemex coffee pour-over setup, which is just a Bodum one that I got at Target for like $20. It worked pretty well though. And I got a grinder because I didn't have an at-home coffee grinder. And because I got this new coffee that I wanted to try, because those of you who know me would know that I'm a big fan of Morgan Eckroth, who is an influencer on YouTube and various other platforms. And she was working with Fellow, which is a coffee supply company that is doing like special coffee drops now, and she has selected a coffee specifically for this program that I received yesterday, I think.
Yes, in the mail.
It came in the mail. I ordered it on Tuesday and it came in the mail yesterday, which was Friday, so pretty quick turnover. But I brewed it. It is currently, not that. What time is it?
It is like almost
it's
8.
It's almost 8 o'clock, and I'm drinking coffee because I really wanted to try my new setup, and I wanted to try this coffee. It's an Ethiopian. It's like it was brewed on August 29th, or roasted on August 29th. It's from Push Pull, which is a company in Portland, which is like 45 minutes from where we live in Oregon. And it's like honey process. It's black honey process. And it has tasting notes of ginger snap, blackberry, and pink lemonade, which makes for a very interesting coffee.
Those are bizarre ways to describe coffee.
even for like third wave coffee roaster, like that is such a third wave coffee roaster thing. So this is my mini coffee podcast within our film podcast.
Yes.
But I've tried it at this point, just like black with a little bit of raw sugar, and it is so strange. It's really good. I like it a lot. It's very complex.
Complex is a good word.
Complex
for
is
it.
a good word. Yeah, I definitely get like there is a citrus that's very like sharp, acidic lemon citrus, and you get your like softer, like fruity blackberry, like almost like blackberry jam, and then it like finishes with this little bite of like ginger, and it's like usually I feel like when I see tasting notes like this on a coffee, I'm like, okay, I might get like the fruity ones, because coffee, if you don't know, comes from a type of fruit that is like a cherry. So it
is a fruit.
Will taste fruity unless you roast it to the point of becoming almost charcoal, which is your dark coffees that are very carbony and taste like gasoline. But if you have a lighter roast coffee, you're going to get the fruity notes in there. And that definitely comes through on this. So I'm very impressed, and I don't mind drinking this cup of coffee at 8 p.m. because it's very good.
Yeah. In contrast to you, I, despite being an artist and an animator, which I feel is, like, always depicted it in people's minds with, like, coffee, I don't like coffee.
Yeah.
I've never liked coffee at all.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the art of making coffee.
Yeah. I've never done pour over before. I feel like I successfully executed a pour over, but I know it kind of looks like a science experiment.
It does. For those who are not in the coffee making world, she bought this thing. It looks like a glass vase you'd put flowers in, but it's like a science beaker for coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it works, but you put the beans in, you pour the water on top, and then you let it do its thing.
Yeah.
I also tried this. It's bizarre. I don't like coffee, but I know what it tastes like. And this is completely different from any coffee I've ever tasted.
Yeah. I mean, when I take you to work, you always get like a chai or something sugary. Mm-hmm. So I feel like,
oh my gosh, I'm a sugar fiend.
Well, and I mean, even like you haven't even tried some of the like more flavorful coffees at Chapters where I work. Just because I know you don't like coffee, so I'm not going to give you something you won't like.
Yeah.
But I give you like an Americano sometimes to try, which I usually have already put sugar and like milk in, and I know you usually don't like that, but yeah, this is I think it's interesting that you notice that it's different. From like coffee,
it's flavorful for sure.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
But I can taste the difference.
I like it, and that's what matters because I bought it. So I will drink it. It's very good.
Well, enjoy it in your Hobbit-themed mug.
Yes, that was the other thing. I have a little mug with a Hobbit hole on the front of it, so I'm using that because Rings of Power.
Rings of Power. Speaking of which, shall we get into discussing this?
Yes.
Because I looked up some information.
Okay. Well, because I wanna like start with like first impression of like whenever they announced that Amazon was going to make a Lord of the Rings show, because that was a couple of years ago at this point, and I think a lot of the fandom was kind of like clenching their teeth, like, oh no, Amazon's gonna ruin it, like they're gonna do something like edgy, and like they're not gonna understand the true heart of Lord of the Rings. And like I think at some point they revealed who'd be working on it, and like Peter Jackson was not going to be involved, and so people were like, oh no, what is this going to be? But I think over time, as we sort of stewed on it as a fandom, the sort of consensus that I've seen amongst people who are optimistic for the show is it is good to have perspectives other than Peter Jackson's on Lord of the Rings, because Peter Jackson is not the only person who's allowed to make film content for Lord of the Rings.
Well, like I grew up with the Rankin Bass like animated cartoons. Like I love the Rankin Bass Hobbit because I've read The Hobbit, and I've like grown up with that cartoon, and it's very, I would say, pretty accurate to the feel of The Hobbit. Yeah. Of Tolkien's lore. Because it was kind of, The Hobbit was kind of written to be for a younger audience than Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I mean, it was written for his kids, for Tolkien's children. It was told as a story for his children and then written down and refined as a story. So yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think coming off of the Hobbit trilogy, which I think every conversation that I have with somebody who has an iota of interest in the Tolkien universe, whenever I start a conversation about The Hobbit, they're always like, it did not need to be 3 movies. And I'm like, I know, but there are still things to discuss here. Yeah. I don't want to say, here are my credentials talking about Lord of the Rings, but
we are fans.
We're fans. Like
we're fans of Tolkien. We're fans of the film adaptations.
Yeah. So like I hate to sound pretentious or like gatekeepy about Lord of the Rings. I apologize if we do. And if you're not interested, then you don't have to listen to this episode because we're just going to be geeking out about Lord of the Rings. Because like both of us have seen the extended editions of Hobbit and Lord of the Rings.
The only editions.
Well, and I mean, I haven't seen theatrical versions of Lord of the Rings. I've only seen extended because that is what my parents had on DVD. And I've read the books for the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I've read The Hobbit. But I have not read Silmarillion or any of the other sort of Tolkien-verse content, aside from, like, some of his notes and other writings and stuff like that appear in, like, a couple of other books, like The Nature of Middle-earth and things like that.
Or the Unfinished Tales.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't even read that. So the place where Rings of Power comes from is not something I'm as familiar with, but there's obviously characters.
I'll stop you there because I was misinformed in what I thought this series was.
Okay.
And now that I've like gone and done some research, because I have a lot of things to bring up to you before we dive into watching these first two episodes.
Because the other thing is I haven't been very I haven't invested myself very much into researching this because a lot of the pre-release reviews of this have been why this will be bad.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to avoid, because I'm a person who, like, if I read a review, it will negatively impact how I perceive the thing that I watch, because that's just how I am. Especially if it's a personal review of something. And so I try to avoid talking about something or reading or watching reviews of something before I see it myself, because I will form opinions based on other people's opinions, and often that's not actually how I would approach it if I was just going in like raw opinion.
Yeah, and that's why I want to give you this I guess pep talk before we get into this, because I'm actually excited to watch this.
I'm excited too. Don't get me wrong.
I mean, I just mean in comparison to a lot of the negative. Like I also don't like when like a hate train forms around a piece of media, regardless of whether it deserves it or not. If it's before release, I almost never listen to any of those reviews because you haven't seen it.
Yeah,
you don't know for sure.
Because
here's the thing, like, you can analyze trailers as much as you want. Trailers are just as much an editing trick as films themselves.
Yeah, they're editing it together to make you want to watch it.
The way that these trailers have been edited is not like the way the Lord of the Rings trailers were edited. They're edited in the same way that an action movie is edited, which some people don't jive with because they don't want, the world of Tolkien to feel like every other fantasy action movie.
Yeah. And
I don't think it will. I think it's just a lot of editing clever tricks that are standard in industry, because the point is to drive up conversation, and I think they've succeeded in doing that.
Yeah, 100%.
Regardless of its whether it's negative or positive feedback, the trailer has garnered enough attention for people to tune into this show.
Yeah, I think most people that I know have at least encountered some kind of promotional material for the show in some way.
Yeah, whether that's images or like quote leaks.
Heck, it's even on if you use Adobe products, the featured images when the product is loading for a bunch of the I use Illustrator, I use InDesign, I use Photoshop, and all of the images that appear when you're loading the programs are Rings of Power themed. So, they're promoting this in a lot of different ways, which is really interesting to me.
They dropped a lot of money on it.
Yeah.
This is a very expensive series.
Well, and we were talking about somebody had seen the pre-release screening of it, and they were like, "This is a film quality production, not a TV quality production."
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did watch one review of someone who had watched it like on release, like or even early release.
Yeah,
and just out of the theater reaction was like
Comic-Con.
Yeah, like the out of the theater reaction of this guy was basically like this does not feel like the Star Wars shows, which some of them kind of, or the Marvel shows that like lack in the quality, like the cinematic quality and like special effects. It feels like a film budget because it is a film budget. Yeah,
and I think that's where I feel optimistic, because I think if you're going to do Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, I really want it to be done.
Yeah, and maybe
right,
and maybe by me presenting to you a few things, I'm going to go through kind of the history of the production behind this, and the timeline leading up to what we have now, and maybe set the stage for you to come into this with an open mind. The discussions for this happened, goodness, probably back 2017
for the show.
Yeah. So J.R.R. Tolkien wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. He passed away, and his son Christopher Tolkien has taken over his legacy. The Tolkien family has basically taken up ownership of his works. Christopher Tolkien has published numerous books of his father's extensive notes. My goodness, does J.R.R. Tolkien have a lot of notes on a lot of things in this world. Like, holy crap.
Like, I understand that Tolkien was alive and creating at a point kind of, pre-internet, obviously, and like...
Oh my gosh, if Tolkien had the internet, the amount of content he would be producing.
Well, but that's the point I'm trying to make, is like, I have the distraction of the internet, but I feel like my brain is constantly expounding on fictional worlds that I want to create and write about, and so I totally get it.
Yeah.
I just don't have the attention span to, be thinking and writing about it all the time like he was. And so I'm like, oh, okay, so, like, that's what he did with all of his time. It's just constantly making notes about arbitrary things to flesh out his world.
So, Christopher Tolkien published the Silmarillion off of his father's works.
Right.
He published a lot of other ones, Unfinished Tales, Children of Huron, lots of other books. A lot of them not always just like full coherent narratives all the way through. A lot of them are just short stories or compiled stories of a similar vein in that realm of time or like of a theme. So it's not none of the other books are like The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings.
Right.
The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings,
complete, well-rounded story.
Right. The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings are very edited and the process of making a novel. Because every note that he ever made for his world, all the history went into that story,
right?
Of the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. That's the story that he wanted to tell.
Yeah.
And so, in publishing other works, that's something that they, I think, keep in mind.
Right.
So here's what my misconception was about this show. They announced it was going to be about the Second Age. I thought, oh, it's like based off the Silmarillion.
Right.
It is not.
Oh.
So here's the deal that they struck. So Christopher Tolkien and the Tolkien estate in 2017 negotiated with Amazon, and they have the rights to The Hobbit. They have the rights to the 3 books of Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And all of the appendices of those books, which there are a lot of things in the appendices, especially in Return of the King. There is a lot of appendices. Extra historical lore and events and characters that add into the story of Lord of the Rings. They do not have the rights to the Silmarillion.
Okay.
The appendices, some of the history does overlap with the Silmarillion, but if an event is mentioned in Silmarillion and not in the appendices, they can't include it in the show. They can allude to it, but they can't, tell that story. The stories and notes that Tolkien included in the appendices of Lord of the Rings all are notes that have to do with that story.
Okay.
That's why this series is called The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and not the Silmarillion.
Okay.
It's about the Rings of Power, the 3 rings for the elves, the 7 to the dwarf lords, 9 for men.
Yeah.
That era, that story.
And the one.
Secret. Which we will probably not see until whatever late season
right.
there is of this.
I doubt that they're gonna be like, oh yeah, and here's Sauron.
Here he is. I am curious if Morgoth is a part of this. I don't know a lot about the timeline of Lord of the Rings, because I know they have compressed things a little bit just for the sake of the TV show. But Morgoth is like the Dark Lord before Sauron.
Right.
He's the granddaddy of evil, if you will.
That's a good way to put it.
So original rumors about the series was that, it's going to be a young Aragorn series.
Oh.
Which was absolutely not.
No, but I remember people talking about, trying to figure out what it was going to be.
Yeah. None of that was true.
No. It's actually a young Elrond series.
So the showrunners, Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne, are writers on the show. You may not know them from a lot of things because they are, I guess, very talented script doctors, which are basically the people that, make scripts good. Yeah. They've also worked, I guess, on Game of Thrones.
See, I feel like I've heard the name Patrick McKay, but I don't think it was from promotional material for this. I think it was from somewhere else, but that name is familiar to me.
Yeah. But all I have to say, Christopher Tolkien was very much involved in the discussions for this series.
Right.
The Tolkien family is very strict on what can and cannot be made with Lord of the Rings content.
No, I know that very much because there are a lot of strict guidelines surrounding creating any material for Tolkien universe. Fan art and fan fiction.
There's a couple notable Tolkien scholars that have been involved in this show as well, as consultants. I don't really know any of them well, but they've hired them on.
I don't know any of them very well, but I would like to know how to become that.
Right.
Because that would be cool.
One of the concept artists on this show is John Howe, who, if you're familiar with him, does a lot of Tolkien art and is an approved artist in the Tolkien estate. So the art for this show, I can't wait for the art book. It's going to be gorgeous.
I remember when they released that he was going to be a concept artist on the show, everyone was like, okay, great, this is going to be good.
That being said, he has made statements saying this is not the same Middle Earth that you see in the Third Age. So, it's not going to be the same. Right. Because this is, again, a completely different age.
Yeah. But I think that's where I'm excited because I want to see... I don't want to see the same Middle Earth. I want to see these cultures expounded upon, and I want to see how they were before. Because one thing about Lord of the Rings that's always sort of been something I've reflected on a lot, I suppose, is that we're watching a story that happens kind of at the end of an era. At the, I think the end of the Third Age. And so all of the,
the elves are dying.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's I'm oh, these elves are so cool. I love the hobbits. I love everything that's happening here. And then this is the end of it. Yeah. We're watching the end of the story. So now we get to see sort of...
This is the Second Age, I guess, is the peak of elves.
Yeah, if you're talking about the big, broad, sweeping story of Tolkien's universe, this is where everything is getting real crazy. So I'm excited for the flourishing elf culture, and because that's kind of the vibe that you get even in The Hobbit is there's not that many elves, and they're kind of all getting the heck out of Dodge because they're like,
they're like,
life is not good anymore.
This place sucks.
This place is not, like, all these humans are kind of ruining it for us, and like the orcs are coming, and you know, Mordor is really harshing our vibe. So, and you know, the end, but also beginning, obviously, because you're gonna have the Age of Men. But I'm happy that we get to live in the elf glory a little bit longer.
So in 2019, they also announced that it would be shot in New Zealand.
Right.
Another plus, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. That's like, you know, if you want to get the Lord of the Rings spirit, you're gonna need to go to New Zealand for most of the filming.
Yeah. And then in January of 2020, Christopher Tolkien passed away.
Right. Yeah, I recall that he was no longer with us.
Mm-hmm. So,
rest in peace, Christopher Tolkien.
This is like, aside from some of the last books that he published in his life, I guess this was like, this deal was part of him like giving this to the next like storytellers.
Right.
So the stakes are high.
Yeah. For
this to be good, at least decent.
Yeah.
And Jeff Bezos has spared no expense because they've dumped $1 billion on this. A lot of money.
I figured it was a lot of money.
A lot more money than I'll ever see in my lifetime.
Yeah. A stupid amount of money.
That's
what we'll go with.
When production started in New Zealand, because of lockdown procedures, the production has actually managed to keep things pretty dark.
Yeah.
Because, like, New Zealand was very restrictive on who could come in and who could not.
Right.
So, like, there's no press during the time that they're filming. There's no, like, major leaks, really, while they're filming. Like, everything was really kept under hush-hush.
I hadn't thought about that.
It was, like, kind of the perfect cover to, like, do what they needed. And Amazon Studios couldn't even, like, come and visit the set, really, like, from L.A., so the creative team in New Zealand kind of had free reign to do what they needed to do. Again, haven't seen the show yet, but I want to be optimistic. Also, Howard Shore composed the theme song.
Right.
And Bear McCreary does the soundtrack, which I've listened to some of the soundtrack.
I don't think I knew that.
You didn't know that? Okay,
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, Bear McCreary does the God of War soundtrack.
Yes, which is, you know,
a beautiful soundtrack.
So good.
It's so good, and I've listened to some of the soundtracks from, like, samples from this show. They're gorgeous.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see this. The controversies didn't really start until they started, like, releasing, like, the cast and, like, the trailers and stuff.
Yeah.
And then everyone got, like, real nitpicky on, like, that's not, like, accurate to the timeline and Tolkien lore, and like, this map doesn't have this thing on it. It's like, it hasn't even come out yet, guys.
Yeah, I'm reserving my criticisms.
Because here's the thing, in adapting this, there's a lot that you do kind of have to fill in because it is based off the appendices.
Right.
And there is no, like, narrative dialogue like there is in Lord of the Rings for the script. Like, you have to write the dialogue for these events. So, like, there is a lot of leeway, but there is a blueprint to go off of. A very well thought out blueprint from J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yes.
But that's all I got.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, I don't really have any. I've only seen the trailers, and I've only watched each trailer, like, once. Especially because so often I try not to watch trailers for things anymore, honestly, because they spoil so much in so many trailers. And
like, trailers now will just throw things in and edit things that are not in the movie.
Exactly. I mean, how many times do you watch a trailer and they throw in a voice line that totally does not match the lip sync of what's happening in the scene? And, like...
Or, like, Marvel will just put a completely different CGI character.
Yeah. They'll throw in completely irrelevant stuff. just to get you to want to watch it. So, and I don't think that's happened here. I have a little bit more faith in this production. So I have watched the trailers because I don't feel like they're trying to give me the entire plot. But they have definitely piqued my interest. I am so excited to see what they do with the hobbits because they're my favorite. But I think, that's a good place to
launch off.
Watch this show. We'll see you when we come back.
See you then.
Intermission time.
Hello, and welcome to the middle part of the podcast.
Welcome. We're coming off that first part. I'm sure it was great, but we want to tell you about some stuff.
Yeah, and we get to do it together on this one.
Yeah, because this is a weird format episode, and we're trying new stuff, and this time we're gonna do this together. So, what do we have to say?
Well, if you like what you hear on this podcast and would like to support us, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CinemaCrushPod. That's at CinemaCrushPod, all one word.
Yeah, we'll be posting updates there and sharing things we love. So you can follow us on whichever platform you prefer, or on both if you'd like. And if you have questions or feedback, you can always tweet at us, DM us, comment on posts. Or even respond to stories that we put out. We just put one out last night while we were recording. So you're always welcome to comment on those. We always love to hear from you.
Or you can email us at cinemacrushpod@gmail.com.
Yeah, email us with your comments, your questions, or dare I say concerns. We will be publishing episodes bi-weekly. This episode is a bit of an anomaly, and we'll see how it goes.
I guess it is still bi-weekly. Because our normal episodes are still going to be every other week, but we're gonna do this little special series during the off weeks with Rings of Power.
So if you're just interested in the movies, keep coming back bi-weekly for those. But in between, if you're also watching a show alongside us, come and listen in.
Join us.
Yeah, we really appreciate you listening and giving our podcast a chance. If you like it and you know somebody who might be interested in it, please go ahead and share it with them. Spread the word around and get the conversation going, because that's what we like to do, is talk about movies with people.
I think that's all we have for now.
Yeah, so let's get back into the episode and see what we have to say about the Rings of Power episodes 1 and 2.
See you then.
See ya.
And now, on with the show.
Hello and welcome back.
Welcome back. We just
we've stewed on it a little bit.
Yeah, we watched the thing, and then we went to bed because it was very late, and I had a lot of half-formed thoughts about this that I wanted to take some time to do some research and thinking, stuff like that. So we're back. It's the morning, and we're here to talk to you about Rings of Power episodes 1 and 2. Hopefully mostly spoiler free, but I can't make any promises. So if you are really interested in watching,
I mean, I'm gonna talk about things that happen in it. So
if you want to watch it, now is your chance. Go do it, and then come back, because a lot of stuff happens in these 2 episodes.
Shall we dive right in?
Yeah.
What was your initial reaction to seeing these first 2 episodes?
I think, so I'll be honest, I liked them. I think that I'm a little bit I didn't have a ton of expectations going in, and I still don't have super strong expectations of where this is gonna go. Kind of in a good way. I feel like they're alluding to a lot of things, but I don't really have a sense of what the twists and the turns in this story will be, so I'm just kind of along for the ride. Because we're working with a lot of characters that we already know, or names that we've already heard, or ancestors of characters that we know. And so we know that later on certain things happen to them, or they're, like, the people that come after them. So, like, Galadriel is in Lord of the Rings. So she obviously survives all of the events of this.
Right. And that's always the problem with making a prequel of either movie or series, is you do have these established characters that you know what happens to them.
Right. But you also have all these other characters that they've introduced that, you start to grow attached to, and I don't know where that's going to go with some of these characters. So I'm interested to see what happens. I think that the way that they've constructed these episodes is good, because there are a few different stories that are kind of all happening concurrently with each other, and so we kind of switch back and forth between them at, like, the main story beats of each character's story. And I think that that's a good way to do it if you're going to have all these characters who are separate from each other.
Yeah, especially when considering the long form media that is this series, because we're going to be in Middle Earth for 5 seasons.
Right.
5 seasons and $1 billion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you're already tying all of these characters together in the first episode, with the quote-unquote meteor that falls from the sky, who is the stranger. But everyone sees it, I guess, except for Galadriel.
No, she sees it.
Does she see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
She was in the water.
Yeah. Yeah, every one of our, like, main characters that we follow is tied together by seeing this event happen. And that's kind of what marks the beginning of bad things starting to happen, because we're being dropped into a Middle Earth. Like I said before, like, Lord of the Rings is kind of like a post-apocalyptic world, almost. Like
they're leaving the world and moving on.
Yeah.
There's less magic than there was.
Yeah.
But my initial thoughts on these first 2 episodes, I was pleasantly surprised by what they were able to do, especially given the content that they're basing this off of, because there isn't, like, a full-out narrative written novel that they're using to, like, write these dialogue scenes. This is all based off of many different notes and stories from Tolkien.
Yeah.
I read one review that I thought was funny, expressing a similar opinion, but basically impressed that they were able to do what they were with essentially working off a wiki article.
Yeah.
Of Lord of the Rings lore. Because that's kind of what the appendices are, is just like, oh, and by the way, these things happened. So to try and contextualize that into this show, I think I have to give props to the writers for even trying to attempt that.
Right. I think it's interesting, too, because a lot of people had the expectation that this was going to be about the Silmarillion, and it's not. Like, as we discussed before, this is, like, the Second Age. This is the appendices of Lord of the Rings. So we're kind of getting, like, an in-between First Age and Third Age little storyline.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's like you are kind of thrown in the middle of the world of Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Because this isn't about the beginnings of, like, Morgoth and Sauron.
Right.
Like, this isn't that story.
Do you feel like, I think one of the things that I was a little bit stuck on is that in Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, especially in the films, we get this sort of plotline where all of the people who are very long-lived, the elves and the wizards, are, except for, like, Gandalf, are dubious that evil still exists. Like, they seem to be fairly confident that evil has been vanquished and that we should let this lie and that we shouldn't do anything to try to root out any remaining sort of weeds that are left over. Because in Hobbit, that's kind of what that feels like whenever the elves and like Saruman are meeting, and he's like, no, that like Sauron is dead, this isn't happening. And at the end of the day, we know that, you know, Saruman is Sauron's little helper, and he's being influenced by evil, and so that's why he's denying it. But I feel like in this series, I'm not really understanding, like, I think one of the things so kind of side tangent, but one of the criticisms that I heard, that I read about this, was that the elves feel more human-like than they should. And I think one of those things is they don't feel quite as perceptive as I feel like they should, because there is evil influence remaining in the South. We're living in a world where it's implied that things were really bad. The Middle Earth was basically burnt to a crisp, and now it's kind of been revitalized in the last, 79 years or so. And things are getting better, but there are still hints of evil. And I find it hard to believe that the elves, who seem to have such a sweeping influence over Middle Earth, are missing the fact that in the South, there are still orcs and goblins running amok.
Yeah.
And I think that's simply because this is kind of the beginning of the resurgence of Sauron. And we're going to see even more of that, and hopefully the elves will pick up on it quickly and be like, oh shoot, we need to get back. We need to fight again. Because that's what they've been doing for the past several centuries, is they've been fighting nonstop. And, I would be ready to give in the towel, too, to throw in the towel. But it seems like they're almost too willing to accept that it's over.
That, or they're just tired of the fighting.
Yeah.
I don't know. The elves, personality-wise, I don't want to compare this series to the Jackson trilogy too much, because it is a different feel. It is purposely a different feel.
Yeah.
Because this is a different age. The elves that we encounter in Lord of the Rings, a lot of them are, these characters, but much, much older and wiser than they were.
Yeah, that's true.
So the impression that I get from elves in those films is they've seen it all.
Yeah.
And they're kind of in this almost holy, lofted pedestal, kind of above humanity almost.
Yeah.
Because just for the fact that they've lived so long and seen so much history.
Yeah.
So they are wise, but only because they have been through all of this, an age.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting what they're doing with Galadriel and with Elrond, because they are younger. They're a bit more fiery, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess I would compare them to Legolas a little bit.
Yeah.
Because Legolas is kind of different from other elves.
Legolas, as far as I understand, also was born in Middle Earth.
Right.
So he's never been to Valinor. He's never seen the land of the elves.
Well, and I think that's something about the elves in this series that sets them apart, is that this is not their home.
Right.
They have come here to fight a war, but this is not where they live. And I think they've been here for centuries. So from a human perspective, the human civilization's oh yeah, the elves, they live in Middle Earth. But that's not really how the elves see it. They're here to root out evil and go home.
Yeah.
And they really want to go home at this point.
And I think the relationship to the humans is interesting, too, because to that point, Middle Earth is not their home, and the humans that they have encountered in Middle Earth are people that have historically served Sauron and served evil to their own advantage. And so, to the point of the elves are not from Middle Earth and the humans are, I think that the elves sort of see humans as, like, a adversary, despite them not actually having... And I think that attitude towards the humans is part of the reason why the humans have the attitude that they do towards the elves.
Right. Well, and, like, even amongst the dwarves, like, there's a little bit of animosity as well, because oh my gosh, I love Khazad-dûm.
Yeah.
The costuming and the makeup is so good in this series. Like, I was not expecting to see so many dwarves.
No, that was so good.
Like, there were so many good, like, beards and, like, designs, and, like Durin is a really cool dude.
Yeah.
like, very, very much feels like a dwarf.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the storyline with Elrond and his sort of foray into Khazad-dûm. Especially just seeing him against the dwarves and, like, seeing their cultures sort of compared to each other.
Mm-hmm. And, like, there is some admiration that the elves have for the dwarves and their craftsmanship. Because, like, Celebrimbor, like, it was so interesting to hear an elf, like, compliment dwarf, like, architecture and culture. Like, he was, like, Celebrimbor was kind of going on and on about it in a dialogue with Elrond. It was like, huh. So, like, attitudes have definitely changed from this age to the next.
Yeah.
So, like, obviously something is going to happen to bring more animosity.
Yes.
Because in Lord of the Rings they talk about, like, there was once an age where men, elves, and dwarves all fought side by side. And I think that's what we're kind of building up to. We're going to build up that relationship that once was through this series. But coming back to the elves and kind of their perspective on everything, like, Elrond is very confident, like, oh yeah, I'll go see my friend, Durin, who he hasn't seen in 20 years. And Durin's, like, super mad at him for that.
Because for an elf, 20 years is, like, the blink of an eye. As he says, as Durin says, he's like, oh yeah, I know that's just a blink of an eye for you. But, like, I have a wife and 2 children now.
And, like, you missed my wedding.
Yeah, like, you forget that even though the dwarves are still very long-lived, their lifespan does still sort of happen closer to a human lifespan. It's, like, sort of in the middle.
Yeah. Like, it's hard for an elf to be friends with anyone outside of elfdom.
Yeah. Speaking of outside of elfdom, what did you think of the sort of storyline being built between, I cannot for the life of me remember his name, but the one elf guy and Bronwyn?
Oh, the soldier.
Yeah.
I think he's the most, like, elf-like elf I've seen in terms of, like...
Compared to Peter Jackson.
In terms of, like, that kind of, like... He's a little bit more detached.
Which I almost feel like that's out of place given the storyline that they're painting for him.
Right. I think that's, like, it feels like he should be the more emotional one. But, like, he's there to do his job. Like, he's been stationed there for 70-some years, you know, the entire lifetime of some of these village folk.
Yeah, I mean, like, the human woman that he's, like, in this relationship with obviously is not 79 years old. So... You know, he's been stationed here long enough and then met her at some point when she was younger. And I think it's pretty clear that they're leading up to, like, this kid that this woman has is his child. You know, I don't think you're going to cast an actor who looks like that and just, like, kind of looks like a perfect mix between those two.
Yeah.
And also, you know, to the point of, like, giving him a haircut that hides his ears and never showing his ears. I think that you're very much leading up to, like, this is a half-elf.
I'm not familiar with the lore of the Dunedain, of, like, Aragorn, but aren't they, like, part elf in their blood?
I think that is true. I would want to look that up. But they are much longer lived than most humans. You keep vamping while I...
Yeah. Anyway, so in general, praises I have for the series. It's gorgeously stunning. The landscapes are amazing. The CG is on a budget that is acceptable to watch for this sort of thing. The costuming is nice. The casting I really enjoy. I do have a few critiques of it. Part of it being some of the dialogue does not feel as Tolkien-ish as it does in The Lord of the Rings. It feels a bit more modern than I think it should, and just some of the way that the lines are delivered. I think the actors all give amazing performances. I don't think there's anyone that I would flag as being insincere to their character. I think I was enveloped in the story and their characters. But I do think, in terms of presentation, that there are some things that they could have done that would have made it feel a bit more fantasy, a bit more in that world. Part of it, in terms of visual look, would be the color grading for me. The color grading was a bit brighter than what I was expecting.
Yeah, I think there was a scene at the very beginning when they're in that ice castle and they're fighting the snow troll.
Mm-hmm.
It felt oddly too bright and too desaturated for me. I feel like if you're gonna be fighting a big monster in a
desaturated
big, dark castle,
or oversaturated.
Maybe oversaturated is what I'm thinking. I felt like the blacks weren't black enough. So
you want more contrast.
I want more contrast, because if you're gonna have a cool fight where lightning is happening, yeah, I need more contrast between the light and the shadow.
Yeah, I think the scenes that need to be darker are oversaturated.
Yeah.
In this series, I think it's too colorful in the scenes that need less color to get the feel that I need for that scene. There are some scenes that you should absolutely pump the color in, when you're showing the majesty of the Numenor and the elf kingdoms. I want there to be color and light and brightness. Yeah. But some of the other areas, I felt stylistically it took me out a little bit.
Yeah. Also, a quick sidebar to the point of do the Dunedain have elf blood? It sounds like at the very least Aragorn's family line did, because when I'm reading about it, him marrying Arwen reintroduces elf blood into his family line. So at some point, yes, there was elf blood introduced into his family line.
Okay. So. I'm just curious because I know they want to connect this to Lord of the Rings,
right? And
I'm curious if this human elf relationship is going to be related to Aragorn's story and his his ancestors.
Yeah.
Because we don't, that's not something that you see in Middle Earth, that elf and human relationship very often, once or twice in a millennia or so.
Well, and to the point, you have Beren and Luthien, which is a known tragedy of relationship between human and elf. And I haven't read that story, but a character makes comment about it. He's there's only been 2 times that this has ever happened, because he's on to the one guy that's with Bronwyn.
Yeah,
he's this has only ever happened twice,
and both of them have ended bad.
Yeah, it's bad. Don't do this. I know what you've been up to. I have eyes. I don't think it's gonna end well. But it's a hard relationship for me to really believe, because he isn't super attached to her, it feels and maybe he used to be, and now they've kind of drifted apart a little bit, especially as things get more contentious with darkness sort of rising. But to the point of he sends her away back to her village on her own, even though he knows that there's evil afoot. And I think that sort of suggests that he knows that she is capable of protecting herself. But also, I feel if you are going to be alone with the woman you love, you would at least send her off with some kind of affectionate words or something like that. But again, he is an elf, and he feels.
He also has a job to do.
Detached elf. So I think we only have 2 episodes.
Right. There's so much more.
There's so much more to explore. Like, I can't expect them to fully flesh out and develop a character within 2 episodes. They're not movies.
Yeah. And that's something that a lot of people have been pointing out is the pacing of this.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoy the pacing of these 2 episodes because they really took their time to let us breathe with these characters for a while before we ramp up into something larger. The first episode, I think, is slower than the second one, but I would say in a good way.
Yeah.
Just because there's a lot to take in. It's a whole new era. There's a lot of storylines and characters to follow.
Right.
And so giving us time with each of them to start out, I think, is a good move on their part.
Yeah.
Because I love the Harfoots.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the Harfoots at all. I wanted to get around to them. The Harfoots and the Stranger.
Yeah. They're not hobbits. They're like
Hobbit ancestors.
Yeah, they're like a subset of whatever overarching... Halflings. Yeah. Yeah, because under halflings, like, in the lore, as I understand, Harfoots are a little bit different from hobbits.
Yeah.
Because they're nomadic.
Yes.
They don't have roots put down.
Right. Which I think is an interesting plot point, because we're so used to, I think it's going to be really interesting because we're so used to hobbits that are very sedentary, and like Bilbo and like Frodo and them are all kind of the exception, but these are Harfoots that seem far more adventurous, still rather reserved. Like they know that they're little, they know that they need to protect themselves, and as a result, they're more skittish.
Very wary of strangers.
Yeah.
But I love the village, I love the characters in it, and I also really like the like lore keeper.
Yeah.
The guy who, I forget his name.
I don't remember either. Sadok?
I think so.
I want to say.
He's delightful.
Yeah.
But I like the Hobbit writing, or the Harfoot writing, I guess.
Yeah.
Because like it makes sense, and it's a really cool like world building thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think I mentioned it while we were watching it, but it was cool to see like their own system of writing, because like Bilbo writes in Elvish the whole time that he is writing like the Hobbit, and so we never really get to see like Hobbit language or any predecessor of that, and so I'm excited to see them developing something culturally like significant and different from what we've already seen for the Hobbits. But I'm curious to see where the storyline goes with all of them, because I don't really know what to think of the Stranger.
Right, let's talk about the Stranger. So the overall thread that connects all of them is they all see this event.
Yeah.
The skies are strange.
The skies are strange.
And, this meteor comes down
with
a dude in it.
Yeah.
Which is so cool.
Yeah.
Definitely, it's gotta be a wizard.
Yeah.
Some kind of wizard.
I think so, but I'm also under the impression that most of the Valar, the wizards, show up in the Third Age. But maybe like the blue wizards show up sooner, just to kind of come like scope things out. So
yeah, I don't know what direction they'll go, because again, this is not based off of like a novel. It's based off of a bunch of notes that they're trying to compile into a series. So it could be Gandalf. There's like alludes to Gandalf-like behavior because he does land with the Harfoots and has a relationship with them.
Right.
Finding him. He talks to bugs.
Yeah. Which Gandalf has been known to do. But I don't know if that's simply because that's what wizards do.
Right. That's the thing with Tolkien's world building of magic is it's a very soft magic system.
Yeah, it's very, like, shrouded in mystery, and, like, the people that use magic know how to use it, but they're not going to be teaching anybody else how to use it. It's not like the elves have magic users.
There's not, like, spellcasters everywhere.
Right.
Like, there are...
It's pretty much reserved for the Valar, which are kind of these, like, half-god.
Because, like, they actually allude a little bit in the elf world of, like, healers. Because, like, elves bodies recover better from injury on their own. And they do have, like, healers, but they're kind of more of, like, an oracle kind of role.
It seems like more like a psychiatrist than a doctor.
Than a doctor, yeah. That's a good description of it. A doctor for the mind.
Yeah.
But safe to say, despite all of the backlash this series has gotten, I'm very excited to see where it goes.
Yeah.
I think there are some faults with it, but not enough for me to stop watching.
Right. I think I'm simply approaching this from the perspective of having only really watched movies, and movies are going to be paced differently from a TV show. And so
right.
I have to get to a place where I'm okay with that, because I think that's kind of what threw me for a loop, is like some of the characters feel less developed than I would expect them to be
in 2 hours.
But that's also just because they're setting things up. We're not really working on character development just yet. We're being introduced to these characters, and they will develop.
This is essentially the prologue to what will be the entire series.
Right.
Like, I think these 2 episodes are just like, here's the setup, and episode 3 will be like, alright, now let's get into it.
Yeah, there's a reason that they released these 2 episodes together and didn't release, like, the first 3.
Yeah. Or just 1.
Right. Yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes. There will be a plethora of content coming, and I'm sure we will continue to talk about it. So, you know, if you have any thoughts or opinions that you want to express to us about this series, because I'm sure people will be talking about it for a while, you know, shoot us a message or something. We'd be happy to read out some comments and things like that, because I want to get people's opinions about this, because this is like...
It's a very divisive series.
Yeah, well, and it's a very momentous thing in fantasy media.
Yeah.
So, it's a big deal. And I'm curious to see what people think, and I'm curious to see how this shapes future media.
Yeah. Here's what I'll say in terms of a recommendation. And then I want to give it my rating. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for this to be like the Peter Jackson trilogy, you're going to be disappointed. If you're looking for this to be a 100% page-for-page adaptation of Tolkien's work, you're going to be disappointed.
I think the interesting thing is, all of the dialogue is completely new. Like, the events that occur are according to Tolkien's writing, but, like, the actual dialogue and the way characters are written is up to the writers of this show. So we're seeing somebody else's interpretation of these characters now, and how they act moment to moment. So I think leaving yourself open to seeing younger versions of characters and seeing interpretations of different characters and their relatives than you have previously seen in Tolkien sort of universe lore will be good. Just leave yourself open. Don't have too many expectations set up. And, you know, kind of let yourself be along for the ride.
And we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll get better. Maybe it'll get worse.
Yeah.
Who knows?
We'll see.
But for these first 2 episodes, as a reminder of my rating system, I rate on a scale of 5 to -5, 5 being the best of the best, 0 being terrible, and -5 being so bad that it's good.
Yeah.
I would give this a 4 out of 5 for these first 2 episodes.
Okay. High praise. I'm gonna give it my chaotic rating system. I'm gonna give it 7.5 snails out of 10.
I can see that.
Yeah. Slightly diminished by the scene where the Harfoot eats a snail. Because that's kind of gross. All I could think of was, like, savory bubblegum.
Mmm.
You can't imagine, like, the chew on a snail, an uncooked snail. Disgusting. But those blackberries still look very delicious.
Yes.
So, you know, I don't anticipate seeing all of the same delicious foods that we see with hobbits, because the Harfoots are very much foragers. But they gotta start somewhere.
But thanks for tuning in to this special episode.
To this weird episode.
And we'll see you next week for a normal one.
Yeah.
And in 2 weeks for the next 2 episodes of Rings of Power.
Yeah. Sounds good. We'll see you then.
Bye!
Thanks again for dropping in, and we hope you've enjoyed the evening as much as we've enjoyed having you here. Till next time, please drive carefully, and good night now.